Greetings, confessors. Welcome to another midweek refuel where we dust off the old Christian literature to be better prepared for today's spiritual warfare. This week's lesson is short and very easy to comprehend. It has to do with our willingness to be swept away by lies that have been packaged in beautiful gift wrapping, or lies that come out in eloquent speech, so that the eloquent speech acts as a camouflage and confuses many of us to where if it sounds good, if it sounds beautiful, we'll believe it, but that's not always true. And Augustine's going to help us with that this week. Hitler himself understood that much of what is being said will be believed no matter how true or how false the message is, if it is packaged in beautiful pageantry and spoken with confidence and eloquent rhetoric. In fact, he practiced in front of the mirror and was quite successful, as we all know. The Demon Rat Party is extremely good with this concept. They understood early on that if you control the narrative and how it is packaged and how it is framed, if you call things love that are not love, then you can guide entire civilizations if that civilization has been intentionally engineered throughout the decades to avoid critical thinking, think politically correct language, and restrict itself to government-approved newspeak, or think of what the media says is okay or what is not okay, or double speak, or what you run into the book 1984 as Wilson edits the dictionary, getting it down to hopefully one day a series of grunts and moans, or what we call politically correct language in today's colloquialisms. Augustine finds himself speaking to a man who is considered an authority on Manichaeism, and we were introduced to Manichae a few chapters back, so I hope you've been keeping up and know who this is that we're talking about. Augustine was extremely excited to meet this man, for he believed that this man would be able to make some sense of the teachings of Mani that Augustine himself believed to be in error and were in error, or in need of further explanation. You know, he gave him the benefit of the doubt. If this doesn't make sense, well, then I need to ask an expert. When he finally gets to meet Faustus, and that's the man that he's going to meet that's the expert on Mani, or Manichaeism, when he finally gets to meet Faustus, or the man from heaven, as they call him, he realizes that Faustus is indeed smart. He's quick on his feet, he's eloquent, and he's charming, but he also found him to be unable to answer any of his questions properly. This inability to answer or make sense of some of Augustine's concerns made Augustine realize a grand and glorious truth. A good meal can come in a worthless container, and a bad meal can be packaged in the finest of china. That truth can be said of language and ideas as well. There are some very stupid ideas that can be spoken with eloquence and rhetorical skill, and to the lazy thinker, these ideas, even though pathetic, they tickle the ears and in some way provide some vision for tomorrow, even if it is a false vision. Truth and beautiful ideas also can be spoken poorly and delivered by someone with no rhetorical skill, and yet those things remain true. The dishes don't change the flavor of the food, and the eloquence with speech does not change the value of the idea that is being spoken. Today's world is a complete nightmare landscape of bad ideas being packaged in beautiful gift wrappings. The woke agenda is a narcissistic death cult nightmare, but they package their ideology with words like acceptance, love, and tolerance when they are anything but. So many gullible, and I do mean that, gullible people. If you're gullible, you can grow out of it. That's why I can say that. It's not like calling you some other name that you're stuck with for life. You can grow out of gullibility just by asking God for some wisdom and doing some research. So many gullible people don't want to be thought of as unloving. So they wave their rainbow flag and virtue signal how loving they are without ever asking, what is this thing I'm actually praising? Is it love or is it something else? They leave it at love and never once ask questions about lust, perversion, or the general welfare or well-being of health and the culture around them. They act as though all the civilizations before them had it wrong and to frown on these lifestyles, or had it wrong to frown on these lifestyles, and never once asked themselves, why? Why did they frown on these lifestyles? It's the old Chesterton's fence. Don't ask for a fence to be torn down until you have first asked why the fence was originally built. If you have never heard the story of Chesterton's fence, I encourage you to look it up and read it. Basically, what it says is what I just said, is that a wise person does ask, why is the fence there to begin with before I even contemplate tearing the fence down? I may tear the fence down because I don't like the way it looks. I don't like where it's at. I don't like what it's blocking my access to. But if I pull it down, I'm going to learn why it was put up. There might be something back there I don't want letting out. The church itself, in many sanctuaries across the nation and across the world, praise God, not all of them, have bought into the lies of Marxism and wokeism simply because universities and governments have done a fantastic and great job at packaging these filthy ideas and these rotten narratives in attractive clothing, or putting manure on china plates is what they've done. What the Bible calls clearly sin and abomination, there's no way around it other than to ditch the Bible. So if you're a liberal theologian and you ditch the Bible, well, then you're once again on, you could be a God too, right? So enjoy where that gets you. These churches call beautiful and accepted simply because their day and age accepted them. They wish to tickle the ears of men and themselves rather than suffer the humiliation of the cross of Jesus Christ. Even churches who have not crossed the line have withheld hard teachings simply because it would upset some of the tithers. This is not good. If you are a pastor and you are bound by any money, you are in a position of being able to be undermined and silenced. You need to break free of that. God's got you, and He'll provide your manna daily. We have got to speak the treasures of Scripture, even if it must pass through these lowly earthen vessels. Even if the best you have is some low village pottery to serve this pearl of great price on, it doesn't change the value of the pearl of great price. 2 Corinthians 4:7 says this, quote, "But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us." The world, unquote, the world serves you manure on gold plates, while God displays His power through these earthen vessels. His ways are mysterious, and He shows His power through the weak things of this earth. The sooner you see that mystery, the sooner you can understand that mystery, the sooner you will have peace, and the sooner you will walk in truth. Turn, if you will, now to Book 5. We're going to be reading chapters 6 through 7 this week. And we meet Faustus, and we learn that bad ideas, even if beautiful, are still bad ideas. So it was that throughout the time, some 9 years in all, that I was a hearer of that sect and a wanderer in my spirit. I longed for the day when their great man, Faustus, would arrive. All the rest of them had proved, when pressed, unable to answer the questions I raised on matters of astronomy and mathematics. But when Faustus came, they assured me we could discuss these points, and he would have no difficulty unraveling them and any bigger ones I wished to raise. When he did come, I found him an agreeable man with a pleasant way with words. He could parrot off the same things that the others always said, albeit with much more sophistication. But what good is it to a thirsty man such as I was to be served from precious goblets by a smart wine steward? My ears had enough of such things by now. They did not seem better because they were better put, or true because they were couched in fine words. Nor did Faustus seem to be a philosopher at heart merely because he looked the part and had the eloquence to match. As for those who assured me that Faustus had the answer to all my questions, they were no judges of things. They thought he was a philosopher and sage merely because he had charm with his rhetoric. For my part, I have come to know that there is another class of person again who is suspicious and ill content with the truth itself if it comes tricked out in elegance and high-flown diction. But even at that time, I had been taught by my God in strange and secret ways, and I believe what you teach me because it is true, and because there is no other teacher of truth besides you, wherever he may come from or however widespread his fame. I had now been taught by you that nothing should be thought true merely because it was eloquently put, or false because the signs uttered by the lips had a rough ring to them, and likewise that nothing should be thought true because it was pronounced in homely fashion, nor false because it was wrapped in lofty phrases. Moreover, I had learnt that there was wisdom and folly, just as there was good food and bad, and that they could be served up in plain or fancy language, just as either sort of food could be served in coarse or fine dishes. This, then, was the man I had wished so long and so eagerly to meet. When I met him, I was impressed with the intensity and the earnestness with which he debated, and by his effortless ease with which he found apt words to dress up his thoughts. I, like many others, was impressed. I praised and extolled him with the rest, and perhaps more. But I was annoyed that among the crowds that gathered to hear him, I was not allowed to push myself upon him. I had no chance to share with him my questions and concerns in friendly dialogue. But when, with a few friends, I did get his ear and found an opportunity for an exchange of opinions, I put forward some of the questions that were troubling me. And I discovered that this erstwhile master of the liberal arts knew only literature and had no special knowledge even of that. He had read some of Cicero's speeches, a few books by Seneca, some odds and ends of poetry, and the more literate of the Latin works of his own sect. This, combined with his daily practice of public disputation, was the source of his rhetorical skill, which was all the more attractive and seductive when allied to his equable disposition and natural charm. Is it not so, even as I recall it, O Lord, my God, judge of my conscience? My heart and my recollection lie open before you. Even then you were dealing with me in some secret corner of your providence, and setting before my face those inglorious wanderings of mine, so that I should see them and hate them. When it became clear to me that he was a novice in the arts in which I had thought him a master, I despaired of his being able to explain and resolve the questions that were troubling me. He might indeed have known nothing of those arts and yet have held on to true piety, but only if he had not been a Manichee. The scriptures of that sect are replete with lengthy myths about the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on comparing them with the accounts given by the mathematicians, which I had read elsewhere, I was eager to know whether the contents of the Manichee scriptures were true instead, or at least whether they gave an account to match that of the mathematicians. But by now I no longer thought that Faustus could give me a subtle explanation of these questions. When I put them before him for consideration and asked him to discuss them, he knew his own limits and did not venture to take up the burden. He knew that he did not know such things and was not ashamed to admit it. He was not like all those talkers I had endured who tried to teach me and said nothing all the while. Faustus had a heart, and if it was not turned towards you, nor was it overconfident in himself. He was not wholly ignorant of his own ignorance, and was not so rash as to let himself be trapped in a corner with no way out and no easy way back. I liked him all the better for it. The modesty of a heart that confesses its weakness is more lovely than all the things I was so eager to know. Such I found Faustus to be on all harder and more subtle questions. So it was that the zeal with which I had applied myself to the study of Mani's writings was checked while I had even less confidence in the other Manichae teachers, seeing as their so-called favorite of heaven had turned out the way he had on all the many questions that were troubling me. I began to spend much of my time with him in keeping with his own ardent enthusiasm for the literature which I was teaching to my young students, being by now employed as professor of rhetoric at Carthage. With him, I began to read through the works that he knew only by reputation and of which he wanted to know more, or which I myself judged appropriate to his abilities. But all the effort I had resolved to expend in the service of that sect fell away as I came to know the man. I did not reach the point of cutting myself off from them completely. It was rather that I could find nothing better than the beliefs into which I had so recklessly flung myself, and had decided in the meanwhile to be content with them, unless something preferable should show itself. Thus, Faustus, who had been a deadly snare to many, had now begun, unwilling and unknowing, to release the snare in which I myself was caught. For according to your hidden providence, my God, your hands did not desert my soul. Day and night, my mother, through her tears, offered sacrifice of her heart's blood to you for my sake, and you dealt wondrously with me. It was you who did this, O God. It is the Lord that guides a man's steps, and the Lord will choose out a path for him. For what is there that can gain our salvation except your hand making anew what you have made? God bless you. May the Lord light your path, and always remember, don't judge a book by its cover. Christ is King. Hail to the King.